Hi everyone, we are going to focus on clauses, periods, and semicolons in this lesson. So the first thing we're going to talk about is a clause. I know we've gone over that a little bit, but I really want you to understand what a clause is, because it's different than a phrase, right? A clause has a subject and a verb. The subject is the person or thing you are talking about. Daniel rode his bike. So Daniel would be your subject. Okay, the verb or simple predicate, these are the same things. So if you're going to say, well, I want the simple predicate, it's the same as finding the verb. If I want the verb, it's same as finding the simple predicate, is doing the action. Daniel rode his bike. Rode is your verb or the simple predicate. Okay, so you have to have a subject and a verb to make a clause. Now you're going to have different kinds of clauses. If it's an adverbial clause, a dependent clause, an independent clause, whatever it is, it needs a subject and a verb. Okay, so let's look at this first sentence. Lisa greatly provided everything he needed. Okay, so Lisa greatly provided is an independent clause. And everything he needed is the dependent clause. But this is also something else. What do you think it is? It's not just a dependent clause, but what position is it sitting in a sentence?
Noun.
It is sitting in a noun position. Nice. Lisa greatly provided. What's being provided? Everything he needed. This is the direct object position. This is a noun clause sitting in a noun position. Okay? And all object positions are noun positions in sentences. See how you can use an entire clause to take up a whole position in a sentence? You can do the same thing as a subject too. You can have noun clauses sitting in a subject. Okay? As the entire subject. You can have those type of things. Now, dependent clause, everything he needed. Does that make sense all by itself? It doesn't. So that means it needs to sit with an independent clause. Lisa greatly provided. Now we're going to talk about different types of sentences. This one we're going to talk about compound complex sentence. All right? Compound complex sentences, they have to have two or more independent clauses. That means that clause can stand all by itself. And they have coordinating conjunctions that join the independent clauses together. So it's two independent clauses that are joined by a coordinating conjunction. They can also be joined by a semicolon, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you need to make, most of the time, you're going to have this joined by a coordinating conjunction. Okay? So also, the complex part of it is one or more dependent clauses. So see how this part is kind of like a compound, and this part is kind of like the complex part. All right? Now, compound complex sentences, let's look at this one. This is an example of one. I climbed out of my bed at 5 a.m. because I had 21 boxes of pears to can, but now I have only 13 boxes of pears. And today I just finished my last box, so I had 13 boxes when I wrote this. Yay! Paul's cheering for us. Which ones right here are the independent clauses in this sentence? Compound complex sentence. You have to have two independent clauses. Which ones are they?
Okay. Because I have 21 boxes of pears.
Is that a independent clause? Mm-hmm. Nope, that's a dependent clause. As soon as you see the
Sorry, I got them confused.
As soon as you see the because or a subordinating word, you know you've got a dependent clause.
Sorry, I got confused.
Okay, so
I understand the differences.
okay, so what's an independent clause?
I have 13 boxes.
Independent clauses they can stand alone.
Exactly. So which two clauses in here are independent clauses?
I climbed out of my bed at
Okay, so there's one of them. What's the other one?
I already said it.
Right here. Now
I have only
13 boxes of pears. See how this can stand alone? This can stand alone. And oftentimes, compound complex sentences, they are some of the biggest sentences that we make because they can have more than 2 independent clauses, and they can have more than 1. You have to have at least 2 and 1. So right here, see how we have this one in the middle? See how we don't have a comma in here because this right here is an independent clause with a dependent clause. So there's no comma. But what do we have here? We have a dependent clause with an independent clause, and that takes a comma. So a comma needs to go here, but it's also, look you guys, we have this one is connected to the coordinating conjunction, but it still goes that right there. Now look at this. We know this right dependent clause because it's a subordinating word. As soon as it starts with a subordinating word, you know it. So what kind of clause is this? Because I had 21 boxes of pears to can. Well, because what? What's because I had 21 boxes of pears to can describing? What kind of clause is this?
Out of bed at 1 a.m.
Oh, because, okay, this is describing, you're close, Paul. It's describing climbed. It's because you climbed because you had 21 boxes of pears to can. This is an adverbial clause or an adverb clause, whatever you want to call it. This right here is your subordinating word. It's setting you up to describe your verb here. Okay? Does that make sense? And see how that helps you understand this? Well, it's because you climbed. You climbed out. Okay, now look at this one, you guys. Compound sentences. They have 2 independent clauses. What's an independent clause, Daniel?
Something that stands alone.
It stands all by itself. That's what an independent clause does. Now, complex sentences, they have to have at least 1 independent clause and at least 1 dependent clause. So if you look at this sentence, I climbed out of my bed at 5 a.m. because I had 21 boxes of pears to can. Now, if you took all of this out, you would just have a complex sentence. But because you have this second part in, you have a compound complex sentence. Does that make sense? Now, you can move this around. It doesn't have to be like this. If you want to have both of your independent clauses together and then you have your dependent clause at the end, however you word it, you just have to put it correctly in your sentence, use the right punctuation. Now remember, to connect all of these words, you have to have coordinating conjunctions. Co means with, remember? And ordinate means order. You're going to put them in order. So you need to make sure you know what they are. These need to be memorized. These are the 7 main conjunctions that we use to connect words together. Nice. Okay, so for and nor, but, or, yet, so. Now your acronym for this is FANBOYS. And if you can remember that, then you can help build on that. FANBOYS. So memorize these. Now these will do different things. They connect differently in sentences, so you need to use the correct one. Also, you never put a comma when using a coordinating conjunction to join an independent clause after the coordinating conjunction. You don't put it here. You put it in front. You never ever put it behind. Do we ever put it behind?
No.
Never. Chad's most treasured memory is in Eugene, but Daniel's most treasured memory is in Victoria. Now, what kind of sentence is this?
Independent.
Okay, so what's that called? 2 independent clauses.
Compound.
a compound sentence. This is a compound sentence put together with a coordinating conjunction right here. And where's the comma go? Before it. We never put it after. Never. It never goes here. See how these stand all alone by themselves? Chad's most treasured memory is in Eugene. Daniel's most treasured memory is in Victoria. See how they completely stand alone? You can just take out the coordinating conjunction with the comma, put a period there, and put a period here. Now look at this one. Daniel or Paul will feed Emma. Well, what kind of sentence is that? We talked about it in another lesson. We're using a coordinating conjunction. Are we connecting how many subjects and verbs do we have here?
They have 3 subjects.
So, but do they go with one verb?
Yeah.
So this right here, that's your subject with one verb, right? So we know we have a simple sentence right here. But see how right here, it's not and. If we put and, it would be Daniel and Paul. That means both of them are going. See how we're using or? That means one or the other one is going. Both aren't going to go feed Emma. So this is a simple sentence. What kind of sentence is this one? Daniel wants neither caramel or white chocolate on his apple. What kind of sentence is this?
I don't know.
Well, is it a compound complex sentence? Is it a compound sentence? Is it a complex sentence? What is it? This is also a simple sentence. See, you have a subject and a verb with direct objects here. With dual direct objects. Okay? With compound direct objects. So there's only one subject and one verb. So that means this is a simple sentence. But see, what's our coordinating conjunction doing?
No.
So it doesn't have to just be in clauses. It doesn't just connect clauses. It's connecting, look how this one connected the subjects. This one's connecting the direct objects. Coordinating conjunctions connect words. It's not just certain things, they connect words. Now here's some more coordinating conjunctions that they connect. Besides, else, nevertheless, otherwise, and still. You can use these also as coordinating conjunctions, but they also can be something else in a sentence. They can also be a different part of speech in a sentence. So you need to be careful with this. See, like beside the chair. See, this would be a preposition. So be careful on how you connect your words, but there are more than just the fanboys. So Lisa didn't organize the dresser because Richard was messy. Well, Lisa didn't organize the dresser because Richard was messy. See how this forces a pause. Here it's kind of confusing. Well, did Lisa organize the dresser? Didn't she organize the dresser? And so that's when you want to find clarity, you add the comma. So this is the rule. If you have an independent clause with a dependent clause, it does not take a comma. See, Lisa didn't organize the dresser. See, that's this right here. So it doesn't take a comma. So you have a dependent clause and an independent clause, they take commas. But here's the exception on here. Comma exception for clarity. If you need more clarity because it's confusing, just add your comma in here. Even, see how we have independent clause and a dependent clause right here? Then you put in your comma. So right here, Lisa didn't organize the dresser, and it's because Richard is messy. See, right here, Lisa didn't organize the dresser, comma, it's because Richard's messy. And this one shows that, yeah, maybe I did organize. I didn't just organize the dresser because Richard was messy. I just decided to organize it. That's how that can be completely confusing. So use your commas if you absolutely have to find clarity. Does that make sense, Paul? Okay, so now, the purpose for clarity, make sure you use a comma. Make sure your sentence is written to be read the way you want it to be understood. If it's not understandable, maybe you should rewrite your sentence. Or your commas force a soft pause and it's understood differently when you have your commas in there. Okay, so now we're going to focus on the semicolon right here, and this is what the semicolon looks like. You use this when you're not joined by the coordinating conjunction. So it's also going to be between two independent clauses. So it's when you're not going to use a coordinating conjunction between your clauses. And they go between two independent clauses without a coordinating conjunction. Okay? So what I thought was also interesting, you can see on some people where they will have a semicolon as a tattoo. Did you guys know that? I didn't know that either, but I thought I'd share that. And it means when you see somebody that has a semicolon on their body, it means they have overcome a hardship. So I thought was interesting. Also, semicolons, they eliminate confusion with long clauses when there are other commas. So if you have a really long clause, which we're going to talk about, long sentences in here, and you have other commas in there, you can use a semicolon to eliminate confusion there. Oftentimes we use the commas, right? But if you need to eliminate confusion to force a pause, you're going to use a semicolon. All right, it doesn't work with just a comma when putting two independent clauses together. All right, so you can't just put two independent clauses together and use a comma. So it doesn't work with just a comma when putting two independent clauses together. You can't just use a comma. If you're going to use a comma, you have to have a coordinating conjunction. All right, now here's an example. The fruit leather is mouth-watering. It is sticky and sweet. So see right here, here's your comma. Is this correct? It's not correct. We have to have a semicolon right here to make this correct, because this is not going to force you to pause long enough. The fruit leather is mouth-watering. It is sticky and sweet. So when you put the semicolon in, it forces a longer pause. The fruit leather is mouth-watering. It is sticky and sweet. So see how this has a subject and a verb. Subject and a verb, right? Does that make sense? So you have your subjects and your verbs, subjects and your verbs. These are two complete independent clauses all by themselves. And you can't just put a comma in there. That is called a comma splice. It's not strong enough to link that. Now, if you want to just use a comma, you have to use a coordinating conjunction. What coordinating conjunction do you want to put in there? And. You want to use and?
You definitely don't want to use for.
Yeah, for it is sticky and sweet. So you're right. We should use and in there. Then this would be fine. It wouldn't be considered a comma splice. But, so if you hear that's a comma splice, that's what that means. It means that this isn't strong enough. It's not correct. Okay, that's what that's called. So the comma does not force a long enough pause to have joining two clauses together. Two independent clauses together. It doesn't force a long enough pause. Now they have to be independent clauses that are put together. Does that make sense? It does force a long enough pause if you have your dependent clause and then your independent clause. It's long enough for that, but not for two independent clauses. Okay, so if using a comma, you need a coordinating conjunction. All right, if you're going to use a comma, put your coordinating conjunction in there, right there. And then you can use your comma. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about the period. That's what it looks like, but I've made it really big, okay? Now, periods, they go in abbreviations. Like if I wanted to call Daniel D, which we call him D all the time, you would put a D then a period. They require periods. And that's mostly in American English. But British English do not require as many periods. So if you're in that area of the world, you need to be careful. Look it up if you're not sure if it needs a period or not. Okay? So like your states, in the United States, if we say New York, you would do NY. Those do not have periods. You don't use periods for that kind of abbreviation. But like Mr. and Mrs. and Doctor, you would use a period. They require periods.
Do you want to write that on the board?
Oh, like Mrs. right here. Period. But let's say we have New York. No period. You do not use something like that. Does that make sense? Or Mr. Period. Doctor. Period. Street. Period. You would use periods on that. But you're not using them when you're using it for a state. Okay, so now, and remember, British English does not require as many periods on abbreviations as American English. You use a period at the end of a statement, and there are different kinds of sentences, right? And the end of a statement would be the end of a certain sentence, because we have question marks. Whoops, that's a terrible question mark, and we have exclamation points, we have periods. Your period comes at the end of a statement sentence. All right? This one comes after a question mark. This one comes after an exclamation. These come after statements. We have Daniel said. So if you look at this, Paul, this is narration. So when you say Daniel said, comma, and see how we have quotes in this. That is narrating, and that's what a lot of authors that write books do. I didn't crash. This is exactly what Daniel's saying, even though he did crash on his last bike ride. So Daniel said, comma. If it's at the beginning, you put a comma here. Okay? And then your period goes at the end. But see how it's sitting inside the quotation marks. It doesn't sit on the outside, it sits on the inside. I didn't crash. You have your subject and verb, subject and verb. These are both independent clauses right here. Daniel said, I didn't crash. I did crash. These are your verbs, right? So you have two clauses here. This is narration, this is a narration, and it has to have quotes. But this is a comma, and your period goes at the end. Do not start your word with a capital or end it with a period if it is surrounded in a sentence with parentheses. So if you have something that you want to put in a sentence in parentheses, if it's in the middle, you don't capitalize it and you don't put it a period at the end. Okay? You just leave it. And then you use your parentheses. I didn't crash on the whole enchilada yesterday. Now look how we have our comma. Comma, period at the end. See? See how this is still narration? We have our quotations around what's actually being said, and then the person that said it is right here. We have our subject and our verb, a verb and our subject, and then we have our subject and our verb. These are two completely different clauses. Also, you do not double punctuation. Do not double your punctuation. So that means we don't do this. I have done that when I really wanted to make a point in like a text or something, but in your written stuff you do not do multiples, and you don't do this because this means something completely different. You don't do two. This means something totally different. You use one. Okay?
You can use 3 ...
Yeah, but if you use What's that?
That means it just goes on.
Right, but if you want it to end, a period means it's ending. So 3 ... it's just continuing on. It's maybe you used a quote or something and you are continuing. There is actually something more left to that quote, so you put more dots on the end. But if you want it to end, you're done, you put 1 period, 1 dot. Okay, you must not crash, exclamation point. There's nothing extra. We don't do this. You must not crash. You must not crash. Don't do that. Leave 1 when you're writing. You don't do anything extra. Do not add a double period after an abbreviation at the end of a sentence. So if you have an abbreviation, what's an abbreviation, Paul? Give me an example. Yeah.
Oh.
So if this is at the end, you don't double period it. If you put doctor at the end, will you come to my house, doctor? You probably wouldn't abbreviate it for something like that, but still, if you use the abbreviation, you don't double period if it's at the very end. Okay?
You do.
Huh? You just use 1 period. And I didn't address every period issue, but I'm addressing some of them. Some of the main stuff. Use a period after numbers, but you can also do something like this. That's kind of goofy. You can also do something like that, but we're talking about periods. So use them after numbers. If the items are short or if they are complete sentences, use a period, which I thought was really interesting. If items are short, see how short these are, or complete sentences, use a period. So if you are doing 1 and you're using a complete sentence, start it with a capital letter and end it with a period. And the same thing here if it's really, really short. But you don't have to do that. With sentences, I would. But you could also do something like this with no period. But the whole point is when you're doing that, you have to be consistent. Do it all the same. You don't do this list with periods and then the other list without periods. Okay, on the same sheet if you're using numbers. Don't use periods if they are short phrases. Okay, so like we can use them in their numbers, but you don't use a period. See how this is a short phrase? What kind of a phrase is this? You're right, Dan. This is a verb phrase. This is a verb phrase. So see how short these are? Okay, so you're not going to use periods on those. But you would use them if they're really short or if they're sentences. Okay, so let's look at this sentence right here. All 3 of you crashed on the ride. Okay, remember, we don't use extra periods. We can do an exclamation point or we don't put extra periods here. All right? This is a period. Don't do it. So, yeah, all 3 of the boys crashed on the whole enchilada, which was such a bummer. Right here, you can call me Mrs. Here's an example where you can use 1 period for this abbreviation and you don't use a double period. Okay? Right here, this is abbreviated, so it uses a period, but it's also the end of a statement. So you use a period. You can call me Mrs. All right? I hope that you will all study your clauses, your periods, your semicolons, understand them and understand how to use them. It will help you write and do better. Okay, we'll see you in the next lesson, everybody.